Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to one of our webinars here from Analytical Factory. We're going to be looking at the Phoebe platform today. The title of the webinar is Insights into How We Communicate Using Emotion Analysis. That's definitely going to be the main theme. We'll talk through the Phoebe platform in more detail once we get into the webinar itself. It should be less than an hour here today. Just a few pointers at the start. All the lines are muted, so we can't hear you. We are recording today's session, so you'll receive the slides and a link to watch the recording later on today. And you can submit questions via the Q&A panel. My colleague Rachel will field these and answer what we can during the session, or we'll come back to you after the session's ended. So that's something that we would do on a regular basis. My name's Jarlath Quinn. I'm an analytics consultant working with Analytical Factory. Just so you know who Analytical Factory are, we're founded in 2018 by 4 veterans of the analytics, data science, and research technology industries. That means that we've got a lot of experience over the past 30 years in statistics, data mining, machine learning, text analytics, sentiment analysis, anomaly detection, a lot of technologies that people these days describe as AI technologies, but in reality are just really just data analysis technologies. Today, we're talking about the analysis of very much audio data, which is just another form of data. So we bring the same sort of analytical approach to that. And the aim of Analytical Factory is really to deliver voice-enabled technology solutions to research sectors, but also to other sectors. We'll see some examples of where using audio analysis of people's voices can be used in things which are, more operationally based, more commercially based, more customer experience based than something like market research or research applications. We don't own the Phoebe platform. We actually work very closely with the developers of the Phoebe platform. They're former colleagues of ours, so we have regular contact with them every week, sometimes every day. So let's just talk about the raison d'etre really of the Phoebe platform. The idea being that voice is still the most intuitive, natural, and efficient way for most people to communicate with one another, and that this is something which we can exploit, given the fact that these days when people really are bombarded with requests for customer feedback, for recommendations, for evaluation of products, for market research. There is somewhat of a small crisis in the research industry in that, particularly with the open-ended responses, people tend to skip over them, or they tend to give very terse responses. This is often due to the fact that they're using, of course, smartphones a lot of the time. So when people are given the opportunity to answer a question using just their voice, particularly an open-ended question, we find about half of them tend to do so. And the reasons for doing that, of course, are convenience more than anything else, which is, they can usually talk faster than they can type, and they don't have typos as much as they do when they're actually typing on their phone. And furthermore, those spoken responses are longer, richer, and packed with revealing emotion and emotion data. So there is something to be said for getting people to actually voice their responses. You tend to get richer responses, more detail, and that can be very useful and powerful. But lastly, of course, if you have a recording, and you don't necessarily have the recording, but you can if you want to look at the recording of the voice, there's actually a lot of information in that reveals emotion data. Now, everything in this slide is very much about the realm of people answering questions and the merits of typing in a response versus speaking a response. We should bear in mind that, as you'll see later on, Phoebe is used when people have been just interviewed in focus groups, for example, or where they've done video interviews, or they've done social media type presentations or responses to questions. So it isn't necessarily a formal questionnaire that's being sent out to them. It's just something to bear in mind. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about is one way for us to capture voice data from a questionnaire, and that is using a little product called Phoebe plugin. So I'll show you a quick example of that. It doesn't take very long to describe to you. So Phoebe plugin is simply the easiest way to voice enable a survey or web form. It doesn't have to be used with all of the other Phoebe technologies we're going to show today. But it's just a possible add-on. It may be used independently. One of the reasons why people find it useful is because it's a single line of JavaScript. It's very easy to add into a questionnaire form, and it's compatible with pretty much any survey platform, certainly with most of the major platforms. If it's a bespoke platform and one that we haven't encountered before, we usually alter or customize the plugin so that it will work with that. It is configurable. You're going to see an example where it's quite a manual approach where somebody's physically clicking record, but you can have an automated approach to that, and we'll talk about that in more detail. Of course, it's particularly useful, as I said, on open-ended responses. So people are simply saying, what is the most valuable experience in this example here that could facilitate at the voice research next time? Voice research being a fictional conference that people have been to. People can simply click record and speak their answer here. What's the advantage from the user standpoint? Well, of course, it streamlines their user experience. They're not typing away and trying to click into things. They can just simply speak. It feeds the transcription. So of course, it's recording it, it's transcribing it, and those transcribed responses go directly onto your survey platform in real time. But it also loads a recording for potential further analysis onto another platform called the Phoebe Portal platform, which most of our today's webinar is going to be focused on, where we can do emotion and sentiment analysis and that type of stuff, and analyze the audio data and the pitch and tone that people are using when they're voicing their responses, which can of course be very revealing in terms of the emotional profile and the emotional cadence. So 2 points there. It feeds the transcription of the voiced responses directly onto your survey platform. And the example we're going to show here is Qualtrics platform. It could have been pretty much any of the other ones. But it also loads a transcription onto the Phoebe portal along with the recording for further analysis if that is deemed appropriate for the client. So here's a little recording I did earlier on today, which is just basically me typing in responses into a very simple survey. You'll see that sometimes I'm just clicking and sometimes I'm actually voicing responses. So let's just listen to that. So the first one, I'm just clicking, I'm just saying, recommendation. Now I get the opportunity to record. It asks for access to the microphone. I thought it was a really interesting conference with lots of opportunities for networking. I stop the recording. It uploads it and transcribes it, and it goes onto the Qualtrics platform. The next one, I get to record again. The venue could have been better. It was difficult to find and badly equipped. Stop the recording, it uploads it and transcribes it. This one doesn't require, of course. I can just click on it. It doesn't need a voice recording, nor does this one. And again, I can just click. We could voice enable these if we wanted to, but it's not necessary. I'd like to have had more time to talk to some of the speakers, as well as the opportunity to play with some of the software tools. Stop the recording, let it upload. Click next, and for final question, no thank you, not at this time. So every time a voice response is given, it's transcribed, and that transcription is loaded onto the native platform for the survey system. In this case, happens to be Qualtrics. But it also sends a transcription and a audio recording to the Phoebe portal platform, which we'll come on to later on. Now, in this particular example there, you can see I was clicking on the record button and stopping the record. For a lot of our clients, that's the best way for them to work. They give some brief instructions at the start, say just click to start recording, click to stop recording. They can actually go back and re-record if they didn't like the responses. What will happen there is that the new transcription will go on to their survey platform, in this case, Qualtrics, but an additional recording will be sent to the Phoebe portal platform. So you can just delete the earlier ones or keep them if necessary. It is quite configurable, so we can actually control whether or not the question is read out or not. So it might be that you want something that's quite hands-free, where they don't even you can also have it automatically start recording if you want, so you can configure it so you don't have to click the button record. And you can have it automatically stop. and you can have it automatically switch to the next question. You can see that we had that switched on in the example I gave where it just automatically clicked to the next question. Sometimes you want to do that because people want to try and correct any mistranscriptions, and it kind of breaks the flow. Whereas in reality, if you're using Phoebe Portal, it's easy to do that when you're listening to the voice responses. You can just correct them. And it's probably, in most cases, only get a word or two wrong. So it's pretty easy to do that. And you can choose, of course, which questions should be voice enabled or not. So, there are pros and cons with that, with one approach versus the other approach. In this example here, we have found that people like to have control over recording. So we give them the opportunity to click record and record their answers. So that's Phoebe plugin. How does it work? How do you actually get it onto your survey form? Well, what normally happens is if it's a new platform we haven't seen before, you simply share your survey URL with us, and we would then provide a customized JavaScript plugin that works with any platform, and that plugin will then be added to your survey. The plugin looks like this. It's usually just a piece of HTML script that is added to that platform. It's added to the survey form, if you like, and it simply then enables that little record button to pop up. You can see here this one's for Askia. In most cases, for most platforms, we've already got one that's pre-built, and we can simply send that across, and people can just plug it in themselves and then test it. So not terribly difficult. So again, just to summarize what Phoebe plugin does, it makes it easy to capture and transcribe voice responses through any web form to your survey platform. It encourages, of course, more verbose responses and streamlines the user experience. And it makes the audio and transcriptions available to Phoebe Portal for emotion analytics, as well as tagging and editing if you want to use the Phoebe Portal. So Phoebe Portal, which is what we lead on to, is where the recordings end up. Okay, so Phoebe Portal can be used independently of Phoebe plugin. Phoebe plugin can be used independently of Phoebe Portal. And a lot of occasions, most people are using both. Some people already have recordings of interviews that they've conducted, so they're not using Phoebe plugin at all. They've actually already got video or audio recordings that they want to analyze in Phoebe Portal, in which case that's very easy to do. It's straightforward for individuals to be given a login to Phoebe Portal and to actually just upload their own recordings. I've done a number of those, and I'll show you examples of that in a few moments. So the raison d'etre of Phoebe Portal is really to reveal what's in people's heads and hearts by unlocking valuable emotion data hidden in our speech. How does that work? Well, data is data, whether it be video, whether it be written transcriptions, whether it be audio, whether it be numbers, anything like that. We can always turn it into something that can be analyzed, something that we can actually do something with. In the case of audio data and people speaking, it's basically an input signal. And from that input signal, you can extract certain features, certain aspects of it. And then you can select those features which are useful for the task in hand. So if the task in hand was to identify that no stress in somebody's voice, you could find the features to do that. And in this case, the task in hand is to try and classify the tone of voice into rough emotional categories, and then to output that to a system to classify it. And it's based on a series of different research articles have been carried out since the 1990s. You can see an example here of one by Khanna and Sasikumar in 2010, recognizing emotions in human speech. And basically what it does is it pulls out these features and classifies people into these categories in the same way that sentiment classification is used, or sentiment analysis is used against text, whether or not people are talking about something positively and negatively. We're talking about whether they're being passionate, whether they're being anxious, whether or not they're being calm, whether or not they're being happy. So in case of Phoebe, it actually analyzes 24 different features, 24 different characteristics of how people speak to detect and score non-conscious emotions. The insights being that you can't get these insights any other way, because, of course, what is written down, what is actually said is not the same as how people actually say something, and we'll see examples of that. How does that work? Well, if you take something like a fairly passionate response, it classifies it based upon things like the speech rate, the pitch average, the pitch range, the intensity of the speak, the voice quality, whether a breathy or tone, changes in pitch and articulation, whereas something like calm responses tend to be quite slower, more considered, slightly narrower. Anxious responses tend to be faster, much breathier, a bit more irregular. So it's using these to try and classify or categorize people. Again, there's some further references here that you might want to look up if you want to look into the research tradition behind this, and find out how it works and how other people have used similar types of neural network algorithms to classify these things. Now, the terms strong, happy, sad, anxious, calm, these are just labels that we're attaching to them. Sad doesn't necessarily mean somebody's actually sad. It just means it's generally being a bit more downbeat in their tone. Sometimes it can mean that they're being quite wistful or considerate. And anxious can mean that they're excited. You know, they have been stimulated in some way, but sometimes it definitely means that they are anxious. What we find is that combinations of emotions are quite interesting in certain contexts. You're going to see an example where people are talking about food, for example, and in the context of that particular survey that we carried out, when we see strong combinations of strong and anxious, we see a lot of expressions of disgust where people, are talking about a memory of food. You'll see examples of this yourself. But this is the principle behind how we're coming up with these classifications. And of course, they may overlap. You should bear in mind that Phoebe does this on the basis of 3-second bursts. So every 3 seconds of speech, it's trying to classify people into these categories. So that's the rate at which it's doing it. Again, some more references here for people, which of course will be in the PDF of the slides we send out if you want to have more, do your own research into the area. Okay, so our first example, one of the issues we had initially when we first set it up was we're trying to get data that we could actually share with the public, because most of the data we're using, of course, is confidential. It's our clients' data. So we thought, what would be a simple thing to do? Let's do our own little survey and we'll ask our friends and family to fill it out. We thought about things which would be direct, definitely emotive, and things which people would have opinions about. So we thought about food. Everyone's got a sort of opinion about food. And we simply sent out a link to a survey on email and WhatsApp groups and stuff like that, and asked people to give us a response to it. So the 3 questions we asked, all of which were open-ended in our Food Heaven versus Food Hell survey, really short, was what was your absolute favorite memory of food or confectionery when you were growing up, and why was it special? What was the worst thing you've ever eaten or cooked? How did that happen? And if you walked into the restaurant of your dreams, what would you order and why? So this led to some really, really good, really interesting, often very funny responses from people, lots of great anecdotes. And it was perfect for our purposes of analyzing emotional response on Phoebe Portal, but also testing out how well the transcription worked. So what we were interested in is responses where the sentiment contradicted the emotional cadence. So when people said something positive, but actually they said it in quite downbeat way, or they said something really negative, but they said it in an upbeat way. We wanted to know which topics would elicit the most passionate responses. And we wanted to know how childhood memories of feelings of disgust or delight would manifest themselves as emotional categories. As I say, we often find that in our analysis, that combinations of strong, passionate emotions and anxious emotions were kind of correlated somewhat with memories of disgust. So let's take a look at the responses. So if I just jump out here to the Phoebe portal, I've just logged in. It's just a login. It's just a link here. I log into it. And I've got a bunch of different projects on here. Here's some from famous interviews, for example. This is just some footage of interviews that I've uploaded from YouTube and stuff like that, like Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew and stuff like that, doing analysis on that. So nothing to do with surveys, whatever. But here's the Food Heaven, Food Hell project. We've got 57 responses from our friends and family. And you can see one of the first responses I like to choose here is a transcribed response, directly goes on to the Qualtrics platform, but is also shown here on our Phoebe portal platform, is from this respondent here. There was only 3 questions. You can see the 3 questions. Question 1, what's your favorite memory of food growing up? Question 2, what's the most disgusting thing you've ever eaten? And question 6 here, which is, I know the order is slightly odd, but it's actually 1, 2, 3. Question 6 is, what would you order in the restaurant of your dreams? So we can filter them if we wanted to. We could do this and say, and just look at the most disgusting ones here. And the first thing that comes up is my colleague, my friend and colleague, Alex, saying that she really hates oysters. He says, So she's saying oysters. That's the most disgusting thing I've ever eaten. I just hate the sensation of that thing going down my throat. Now, when I click on that, I can immediately go into the transcription and see it in a bit more detail here. And you can see that it's the overall transcription here, which is only about a couple of seconds long. It's only about 3 or 4 seconds, enough to get 2 classifications going, is strong and happy, even though the sentiment itself is really one of disgust. So you can see that the sentiment is negative, but the what we call the ERS, the emotional resonance score, which is just basically tone of voice score, whether it's upbeat or downbeat, whether or not they're pretty positive or pretty negative, it's very positive. Now you think, how could that happen? Well, of course, the answer is in how she says it. And the first thing is that she doesn't just say oysters. I hate the sensation of that thing going down my throat. She says oysters. That gets her a strong score because that's a very passionate response. I just hate the sensation of that thing going down my throat. And I can hear it when I play it.
Oysters. I just hate the sensation of that thing going down my throat.
So you can hear she's starting to laugh. We can actually visualize that in real time.
Oysters. I just hate the sensation of that thing going down my throat.
So it's a classic example of the difference between sentiment and tone of voice. And the way somebody says something is not necessarily the same as what they say. Here's the same respondent talking about her favorite memories of food coming up, and it's almost a complete opposite here, where we've got quite a lot of sadness, even though she's talking about a very, very fond memory. Does that mean she's actually depressed? Well, you listen to it yourself. Let's play it and see what you think.
Warm hot chocolate on rainy days, because always when it was raining a lot in my childhood, my mom would make warm cakes for us, and I love it, and I try to make it for my kids too nowadays when it's raining.
So you can see that it's not sadness, it's wistfulness. So we get a lot of this when people are talking about their parents and talking about memories of growing up. You get a lot of wistfulness. It's not, perhaps that's the wrong category, the term to use, but it is interesting. It's a definite signal that's picked up there. That's useful. Everything that we're showing here can be turned into data. So for example, I could actually click on this one again. I can actually show it as data. So I can actually see the transcription with the emotional categories along the side here. And I can tag up bits of it. You'll see I've actually got little tags. We have childhood and kids. So I'm creating topics to be searched on. So I can search on, what do people say when they talk about their childhood? What's their emotional profile? And we'll show you a little example of that in more detail later on. But the other thing I need to point out is that everything can be downloaded. So I can download the audio. I can also download a PDF of the transcription itself. So I can click on that and see what is the transcription itself. Here I've switched on the emotion bar, so it's showing that. If this was an interview, it'd be saying speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 1, speaker 2, or the name of the speaker. So that's called diarization. And lastly, of course, for the entire project, I can actually download the technical data behind it, the actual emotion scores for each 3-second burst, or for the overall response itself. So everything can be turned into data, and because it can be turned into actual numeric quantitative data, as well as qualitative data in the form of text transcriptions, means that we can do further analysis on it. Okay, let's just skip ahead. Let's look at a couple more examples. There's some great examples down here. So here's an example. I think this is my sister who's asked about, what a restaurant of her dreams would be. And you can hear that the start, when she starts off, a lot of people are quite nervous at the start because they're being recorded, and they can tell they're being recorded. And then they get into it and they really start thinking about what they love or what they hate. So this is a bit longer, this response here. You can see here, if I switch on the emotion bars, it doesn't take long before she's in a very happy zone. There's one little bit here where she gets anxious, and it's kind of interesting what bit where she gets anxious. So she starts off a little bit anxious, and then she starts speaking about the topic.
Okay, so the restaurant of my dreams is pretty much up and down the high street. It's not of dreams. It's not some big fancy restaurant or doing cordon bleu food or anything like that. My husband and I have this chat about what would you have as your death row meal, your last meal that you could have. And mine's is always sandwiches. I think sandwiches are delicious. I love them. I love them in every shape and form. bread is like my number one enemy.
It's interesting. The one bit where she gets anxious is when she starts talking about bread being her number one enemy.
And I try and avoid it, but I absolutely love sandwiches. I like food that you could pick at, whether it be like olives and salami and nice cheeses and grapes and stuff. But just a lovely selection of sandwiches would be my absolute favourite meal.
So again, bear in mind that Phoebe's not paying any attention to what is being said. It's simply the tone of voice. Phoebe isn't analyzing the text in any shape or form. It's simply the voice itself that is using to classify them. Okay, let's look at two more examples. This is one of my another favorite examples of mine. So this is somebody who was talking about, you know, the worst thing that they've eaten and their favorite thing when they were growing up. And it's actually the same person, and it's just really interesting to compare and contrast that. So let's listen to this guy here. He was talking about his mom. You can see right away it's just strong and anxious all the way through. It's the worst thing I've ever eaten.
The worst thing I've ever eaten was actually my mum's pork mince. It was boiled to within an inch of its life. It was bland. It was wet. It was just soggy mince, and it was a poor thing to serve. That was the worst thing I've ever had.
So compare and contrast that to his favorite memory of food growing up. You can see it's very happy here.
When growing up, my favourite food was the Findus crispy pancakes, and the reason was because it was the only thing that my mum didn't crucify.
Notice that, again, the only time he gets anxious is when he's talking about his mum.
Everything else she used to ruin, but those, she used to sort them out good and proper. And as a hungry lad, used to wolf down loads of them. Loved it.
Okay, so that's a good example of us walking through some of the results from the Food Heaven Food Hell survey. I did talk about tagging. You can see that there's a sort of tag control here, which you can have. Tags really useful because it allows us to create groups and then to do analyses on that and say, okay, you know, what was the emotional cadence when people are talking about a particular topic or something like that. We'll see more examples of that. But suffice to say, if you want to do your own tagging, just go to search here. One way to do this, for example. And then if you search for something like school, because people often talk about school, I could right click on that and then I could click here and I say, okay, let's create a tag. So I'm going to create a tag called school. And the type it belongs to is education or school. I'm going to call it school. Why do you have a name and a type? Well, the type is the general group it belongs to, and the name is the word itself in this case. So it could be a word or it could be a sentence or something like that. But you might have somebody talking about, you know, schoolmates or school chums or education or class or teacher or something like that. And they would all be individual names or terms, if you like, and they would all belong to the same term type of school. And you just give it your own color. So you can very quickly actually create your own tagging. And we're currently working on a system where it'll automatically do some NLP, some text analytics, and pull out topics for you to suggest tags you might want to attach to it. The whole point about tagging then is for people to say, do further analysis and say, well, when we're talking about something, you know, when we're talking about a particular topic, how are they talking about it? Are they talking about positively or negatively? So on the basis of that, let's just look at another example here. This is a much larger example. This is a research about people's attitudes in the pharmaceutical industry. It's across the UK and US. There's a lot of different accents in here. Phoebe tends to deal quite well with different accents, generally speaking. But one of the things I wanted to show off was this find facility here. So if I looked at, for example, if I search for a term like cure, you'd think that would be pretty positive in this context. But actually, when we look at the sort of the emotional resonance along here and the scores along here, there's a lot of quite strong and anxious scores. So if you listen to one of these responses here, you can see why.
I really can't think of any good thing that they do because they're in it for profit. I still think that they've got cancer cured and they just won't release the drug because then they wouldn't have all that research money going to them. And just like insulin, I'm not diabetic, I'm on insulin. Insulin has went up from $20 a bottle to over $200 a vial for Humalog. Ridiculous. They have made no improvements whatsoever.
So when I searched for that term, all it did was it grabbed enough seconds either side of that term to give me a kind of sense of context around it. That's why it's kind of running out at this stage. But you can see with that, obviously with that response, there are a lot of sort of negativity and anxiety around that particular term. And that is typical when people are talking about cures. Whereas, for example, when they're talking about family, it's a mix of emotions, because sometimes people are really, really, really happy talking about the family, and other times they're really worried talking about the family because they're thinking about their father or illnesses. Here are all the different tags that have been attached to that project. So right away, what the tags do, tags allow us to then look at particular topics and search for them and say what's happening there, or to look at particular drugs and search for them so we can tag them up. It also means it opens the door for us to then start doing some reporting and charts. So if I look at some of the reporting and charts, we've got sort of emotion analysis for different terms. We'll look at this in more detail. I'm just going to search through these and give you a little example. Data facts, when people are talking about things, they're less strong when they're talking about fever. They're more strong when they're talking about eczema. They're less strong when they're talking about addicting and so on. So you can find these terms. Drugs, when they're talking about that, whether or not they're positive or negative, or where that is in the emotional cadence. So there's a lot of stuff you can do around the analytics itself, and saying, when people talk about these terms, what's the emotional profile, and how does that compare and contrast to other topics that they're talking about? Okay. So that's a quick example of taking us through Dynata. I did want to show some other examples here, just things which are not related to research itself. So one of the things I was working on was with a client, was we were looking at call center information. So I'd actually just again went and grabbed some data off YouTube of call center calls. This is actually a real call center call, somebody coming in here. And one of the things that this client was interested in was whether or not the tone of voice of the operative, the outbound caller, would affect the success of the call, of the sale, or of the outcome of the call. So this company here is one that's on YouTube, and they actually provide scripts into how to sell, I guess, over the phone, if you like, and what would be a good approach to take to that. So this is a real call that's calling in. We can listen to it, and you can hear that the caller, she's pretty downbeat all the time. This was not a successful call.
Michael Halper, please.
This is he.
Oh, hi. This is calling with, we're local here in Sugar Land. Just wanted to introduce our company, give you an opportunity to see what we have to offer, and offer you a no-cost, no-obligation second opinion. And I was wondering, do you handle all of your accounting in-house, or do you outsource?
We have a CPA that does our taxes, but we do bookkeeping in-house.
Okay, bookkeeping is in-house. Okay. So we would like to invite you to a Zoom meeting. We're running them in the next 2 weeks, where you can learn a little bit more about our company, our services, and how we are helping companies like yours to save on taxes, be more successful. Would you have about 20 minutes for a Zoom meeting to do a comparison?
Why don't you send me an email with your information?
Okay, that's fine. And what email do you want me to send that to?
It's at salescriptor.com.
Okay, very good. I will send that to you. I'll have my name and my direct phone number on the first line of the email. So
Okay.
if you want to do a Zoom meeting, you can just give me a call. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
So she's following the script there, but her tone of voice is generally pretty downbeat. He starts off really quite calm. He's actually really calm. And then as he gets into it, he starts to get more hesitant. So he's quite calm there. That's his response. He gets into it, he gets more and more hesitant over time, and he starts getting, why didn't you send me an email with your information on it? There's a little bit of anxiety around there. It's very interesting. You imagine how we could correlate the results of each of these emotional scores of the caller against the actual outcome. When we're actually doing the analysis on this, we can do what we call diarization, which is where we tell it who's speaking. So we have the agent and customer. It automatically detects, because of the two voices, it can automatically detect voice one, voice two. And all we do then is we go to the speaker diarization here, and we just give them a name, so agent, customer. So I could do this, for example, with Megan versus Oprah. It's pretty easy to do that. And when you have more than two voices, we have to do it manually. but it's generally pretty. You can do it quite quickly as long. We've done it actually with hours of interviews, and it takes about the same amount of time as listening to the interview. But that's only when you're doing with like 3 or 4 different people, and it makes it slightly more involved. But with 2 individuals, you can actually automatically distinguish between them. And the reason why you might want to switch in, identify one as the interviewer, is so that their questions are not added into, their voice is not part of the analysis process, so it's actually masked out. They're effectively a missing value, so that any emotion scores aren't included into that. Okay, the last thing I wanted to show you here in Phoebe Portal is actually a little report, one of these videos that I've uploaded. So it turns out that we're now supporting, in version 3 of Phoebe Portal, was supporting video. So I went onto YouTube yesterday and found a little video for people evaluating Waitrose products. And it was just two sisters actually speaking, and it was kind of fun and interesting. I thought this might be useful. So you can hear we tagged up 3 different topics. They're talking about croissants, cinnamon bun, and a yum yum, particularly, and also their mum. Talk about their mum a lot. But let's actually just check it out. So let the video load up. You can see here's the transcript. This is only 2 minutes 41 seconds. I'm not going to play the whole thing to you, but you get the idea of it. And again, the transcription itself is happening automatically. Okay, so we're not adding this in; it's just automatically detecting what they're saying. I had to go through it and correct it every now and then. It had difficulty with them saying croissant, so I just had to go through and correct that. But apart from that, I mean, it pretty much got everything correct. And you can see the text coming up as they're speaking.
It's all right, but I feel like all croissants taste the same, and people are going to come at me for that, because last time I said it and people were like, you obviously haven't had a good croissant if you said that. I liked it. You liked it? I liked it. Did you love it? I did not love it. See, if I had a choice, I sound like a broken record.
So they have a tendency to kind of go off on a tangent a little bit here, but they basically end up evaluating 3 products, which is, as I say, the cinnamon bun.
Oh, yeah. There was only a few things. So some of them were packaged. So if you're like going to Waitrose.
So we'll have a little look at what they say here.
And the cinnamon bun.
Let's see what they say.
Oh, I like that. That's my favourite so far. We didn't rate the croissant. We didn't rate the croissant. I'm all over the place today, guys. So
they end up rating the croissant. They kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent.
I was going to say 5 too.
They give it a 5 out of 10. And then at the end, they rate the yum yum, but they start talking about their mum. And that elicits quite a lot of positive, warm feelings.
Because I feel a bit sentimental. Sentimental? You know why? Why am I sentimental for yum yums? I don't know. Sorry guys, hang on. Do you mean mum? Mummy, yeah. Yeah, because mum loves the yum yum. Or yummy. Wait, is this the yum yum? Yum yum. Yummy. Have I got icing in my hair? Not anymore. So
it turns out you do a little simple report on that. It's just like a little 2-minute video. You know, you can actually get a little report out of that. And here's the report where we look at the emotion comparison of 3 products. And it looks like the croissant did not score well, and that was reflected in their voice. The yum yum really scored well because we're talking about their mum a lot and how much they really liked it. And cinnamon bun was just a mix of different things, because when they were talking about it, they started going off on a tangent about how they were all over the place and how their brother had a toothache and stuff like that. So they got a kind of a mix of emotions. But it is interesting to show what you can do very quickly because it's all automatically transcribing these responses and automatically categorizing them going along to create these types of reports to see how people are evaluating these things based upon their emotional response, based upon their tone of voice. Okay, we've only got 20 minutes left. Let's just summarize here where we are with Phoebe Portal. So first of all, everything that we're doing thus so far was in English. We do actually have, and you can see some responses here. We have actually a non-English responses here. It does support a range of different languages, and we do support translation to English directly. So if you had, for example, a Spanish response, you would see the transcription in Spanish, but you would also see the English translation. And it does emotion detection on those. The emotion detection pack, or the audio or analysis pack, is actually trained to that particular language. So obviously the cadence of Italian is different from the cadence of English. So they've used different languages. One of the ways in which they did that, I think, I'm not sure if this is apocryphal or not, but I think that the term Phoebe comes from the fact that they used dubbed versions of Friends. So they had the same script being spoken in different languages, and that's how they ended up training it to different language packs, which worked very well, very effective. And the other thing to bear in mind is, of course, we've got lots of new insights and reports that we can generate. So we can instantly get a set of big picture summary reports, see comparisons of positive and negative emotions. We can export the data for additional analysis. We can highlight interesting passages and transcriptions and see the emotional profile behind that. And we can actually integrate Phoebe via an API or WebSocket. How are our clients making use of Phoebe Portal? Well, they're leveraging these AI capabilities to process, visualize, and score the shifting emotional characteristics of the human voice every 3 seconds, of course. They're applying the emotional analysis capabilities to short form, less than 30 seconds, and long form, up to several hours of human voice audio, where they're doing in-depth interviews. And they're basically creating new data, numeric emotion data from the analysis profile, and using that to enrich their existing analysis process, as well as creating bespoke tags, segments, and filters to add dimensional dimensional aspects to the reporting and analysis. This includes things like creating emotion score matrices filtered by segments, concepts, and themes. Here we have people talking about different products. When they're talking about product 1, concept 2, concept 3, different design products. What is that above or below the average for strong, for happy, for anxious, for calm, for sad. They can also do word clouds, what words actually pop, broken down by different emotions. When people are anxious, what words are they using when they're anxious? When people are being passionate, what words are they using? And of course, they've got these temporal emotional charts, these recordings, which they can create, and they can take little snapshots of to add context to their analysis, say, this is what people were saying when people were actually talking about this particular concept. And then they've got these, as I say, series of summary reports and charts, which can be accessed via the portal itself, or you can create your own charts, of course, by exporting the data directly into a third-party tool, like it could be Excel, or it could be Power BI or something like that. So Phoebe Portal transcribes and analyzes uploaded audio data from survey responses, interviews, and focus groups with multiple speakers in multiple languages. It supports translation of transcribed audio to English for several languages. It does not require Phoebe plugin, but Phoebe plugin, of course, can be the instrument by which the audio data ends up on the portal, or it might be that you've already got recordings. And audio can be in almost any format, even extracted from video recordings, or you can use the video recordings themselves and view those on top of the audio. Lastly, the Phoebe Live product does exactly what we've seen so far, but it does it in real time. So this is used, of course, when people are actually interviewing somebody live. They're looking at their responses. They're seeing their emotional response to questions. It's a great way to identify coaching opportunities when you're listening into, for example, a call center speech, or where you're actually doing an in-depth interview, and the emotional profile responses are guiding the questions that you're asking. So it helps you to ask smarter questions based on the observed emotional state. And it can be used against live broadcasts as well, of course, if for topical information that's coming through, perhaps news events, which again can be quite interesting. So the Phoebe platform consists of Phoebe plugin, Phoebe portal, and lastly Phoebe Live as well, which provides real-time emotional tracking and analysis of people's non-conscious responses. I do hope you found that useful. If you want any more information, then I suggest you go onto our website. We've got some videos and stuff that we can show if you wanted to share with your colleagues. And of course, you're going to get a link to a recording of this actual webinar. So again, feel free to share that with your colleagues. If you do want to get in touch with us, then by all means, drop Rachel an email, and we can talk to you about pricing and the pricing model, how to get started on a small scale if you want to test out some of this, or to work on an up-and-coming project. Thanks very much. We look forward to you logging in again.